Europe was at war, and I felt useless. I hear you're the woman to see about a job.
I am.
We don't hire older models.
I'm not a model anymore.
I'd rather take a picture than be one.
It's just so creative.
So Kate, this Kate here, you started wanting to make this movie in 2013. It took you 8 years to make?
2015.
Whoa.
So that's 9 years from then till now. Yes, that's right.
Why were you so determined to see this through, to keep it going? And what were the impediments? What were the obstacles?
I realised, I knew who she was, and I was familiar with her photographs, her photographic work. But what I could see very clearly was that history was somehow in danger of defining her through the male gaze. She was described, and still is, to a certain extent, as the former lover and muse of Man Ray, ex-cover girl, ex-Vogue model, these labels, these infantilizing labels that I'm afraid do tend to get stuck on women. And Lee was a life force. She was extraordinary, and she lived so many different lives beyond this little sliver of time in her 20s when she was a model, which she hated doing. I'd rather take a picture than be one. It's true, she really said it. Her photographic work was extensive, and when war broke out, she was living in London with Roland Penrose, and she knew she just couldn't do nothing. She was working for Vogue, so she went to Audrey and suggested the idea that she would become this war correspondent for the female readers of Vogue. And what she did in cutting through that red tape, in getting the permissions to go, and even when she got there, she was still being shut out, but she found her way and she kept her foot on the gas, and she kept her eyes open to bear witness, to be that visual voice for the victims of conflict. And she didn't flinch, she didn't look away. And using that Rolleiflex camera, you look down at the image, so she was meeting the gaze of those people. She was showing up for them and standing in their world with them. And that's what sets her photography apart. So
when you have that extraordinary set to with your editor, Andrea Riseborough, playing the role, Andrea, what was it like to have this set to, this incredible one-on-one with Kate? It's such a force, such a power coming at you.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It's majestic to see Kate. It was wonderful to get close to Audrey. It was wonderful to understand that she was she was a very left-leaning politically woman in quite a conservative fashion world, and not terribly well versed in fashion. But she became the unlikely editor of British Vogue during the Second World War, and she advocated in every way that she could when she saw Lee's immense talent, not only as a photojournalist but also as a writer. It's unbelievable.
And the scene, that scene that you're talking about, it really happened. And I met a woman named Pam, who is now an elderly lady, and she had worked as a secretary for Vogue at the time. And she said, well, Kate, I will tell you this story. She said Lee came in one day, and quite honestly, she was rather drunk. And she was furious. She was in the acute stage of PTSD, and she was ripping open boxes and pulling open drawers and filing cabinets and throwing things around until she found what she was looking for, her Dachau negatives. And she was so furious and felt so betrayed that Audrey hadn't printed more of these images in that issue of British Vogue. She took scissors and she started hacking and hacking into these images like she was trying to cut them out of herself. And it's true, she really believed that if nobody saw them, the world should not see them. So that metaphor, the idea that she was trying to take something out, I thought, my God, it's got to be in the film. And then that day that we filmed that scene was just, it was just terrible. And then immediately afterwards, we filmed the scene where they sit on the stairs. And that was, because she never told, you see. Making an authentic film about a woman who gave voice to others, we knew that that was the one moment we could allow her to have her voice and step away from her shame.
So, Ellen, you brought this subject to Kate in the first place?
We both had talked about Lee Miller when we were doing Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind together.
Yeah, and I had bought a table at auction that that some friends of mine called me and said, Kate, there's this table that's come in, and it's a table that was owned in the family home of the Penrose family, and Lee and Roland would go and spend time in this holiday home, and Lee was a great cook, and she would cook at this table, and she would feast and she would share, and they would converse, and Man Ray and Paul Eluard and Max Ernst, and they would all go and have these wonderful feasts at this table and these meals that Lee had cooked, and I bought this table.
When you had bought the table, you called me up and you said, Elle, I bought this table. We were thinking about who would have been at that table. I mean, Max Ernst, Paul Eluard, Man Ray, all of Picasso, the surrealist of the time. And, so it opened up this whole other world. And I didn't know that you were actually beginning to work on this script until 2018 when you brought it to me and you said, I know you've been directing episodic, so would you look at this and consider directing this film?
And Catch-22, which was a very ambitious period piece, which showed what you could do. Gorgeous.
Yeah, with when we talked about the film in the very beginning, we knew that we didn't want to make it a biopic. We wanted to be able to, look at a period in Lee's life that really captured the essence of who she was. And also, choosing the end of the 30s was particularly pertinent, and especially now because they were right on the cusp of what was war, but they were unsuspecting. And we really wanted to be able to show that in the film of how carefree they were. They were surrealists. So, they were living this carefree life and not knowing was around the corner. So, we tried to construct the film in a way that was, had a film story to it. It had a beginning, middle, and an end, and was structured differently than a typical event-based kind of biopic.
So Kate, tell us, the other Kate at the end there, tell us a little bit about how difficult this was to get done. This is a big, ambitious movie, period, lots of locations, lots of war. Go for it.
Well, all independent films, I think, are quite hard to make. And Kate had been doing it for 5 years by the time she came to me. And it's difficult to get the financing. We were shooting in 3 countries. So we shot the south of France and Croatia, and then we shot Hungary for nearly everything else. And then we had 1 day in London at the end. But we had some amazing women who supported us. It was an amazing project. It brought everyone together, and it felt like that when we were all shooting as well. And what was Kate and Ellen and everyone had done so much work on, knew all the photos of Lee's. And so you've got this kind of still photo in black and white. And then what we have to do throughout is create the lead up to that. So understanding how she got to that photo. And she didn't just take a photo, often she set it up.
When we were looking at locations, part of that was about trying to find places to create the world of which these photographs are being taken, and the world in which Lee, moved and acted as a photojournalist. But we wanted to look for the spirit of the truth. It's finding places that weren't literal, but was being able to, capture that of the truth of Lee. So that, in creating the environment so that when Lee went in, when you were going in for the first time to see the Burgermeister, as he had committed suicide and coming upon this young woman who had committed suicide, it was really interesting to see Lee and you as Lee being able to go into the room and see what you would decide to take photographs of. And the same with Davy Sherman, going into the room and we're able to capture and see and experience with them what they were thinking as they approached that scene.
So Andy, you joined this group, and I love this role that you're playing here, a dramatic role for you.
Thank you.
But how did you two develop this rapport that you had, this kind of banter, and it was good?
Thank you. I think it was lucky, partly. I mean, Kate and I think everyone that was involved were interested in me for it. I obviously have a pretty striking resemblance to the actual David Sherman, which I think is where the conversation started. And, Kate and I spoke a few times and ran scenes together even. And, with casting, having done it from the other side where you bring other people into your own project, a lot of the time you just go on instinct. Kate and I happened to get along really well, and feel like friends pretty much immediately, and I think that really helped in terms of making the performance feel that way. But it was also great writing, and everyone took real good care of me, I felt.
I mean, as Andy said yesterday in a Q&A, you're in those situations and you know it isn't real, but you know that it was real. And when we walked into the room with the pile of corpses, Andy and I had not wanted to walk into the room until we were rolling on the scene. And after the first take, I turned to Andy and I said, my God, special effects have done an incredible job with these bodies. And then 3 people sat up. And they were these extraordinary ballet dancers. And they were lying on the top of the pile. And we just looked at them, didn't we? And we just said, oh my God, thank you. And they said, no, it's important. And it was honestly, I mean, there were things about that whole sequence that, and Anthony Penrose was actually there. He's in that sequence. And we said to him, why did you want to be in this? And he said, I just have to.
And we thought it would be important that we wouldn't, try to show, everything in Dachau, but to be able to experience it through your experience, through David and Lee's experience, and be able to go with them and see how they were reacting, rather than trying to just depict everything that was there, and to make it much more of a personal experience and a personal journey.
I also will say something that you did, Ellen, and that was set up really beautifully, was when we were rolling on the scenes, especially when we were first discovering the camp, I couldn't see a camera anywhere. So as a performer, to let yourself believe it's really happening, there was no sign of the fact that I was part of making a movie. It was like truly walking into what it would have basically felt and looked like. And it was obviously horrible and really intense, but I think was instructive.
But then you opened up at Toronto a year ago, because I talked to you in Toronto, Ellen, and it was, you got picked up right away, roadside, everything, and here you are, opening a year later.
I still can't believe we don't have to make the film anymore. I'm like, oh my God, we've done it. We don't have to keep making it. It's really happening. Yay. And honestly, we've sort of imagined this time, Andrea and I would talk about it on set. We'd say, we're going to do actual interviews and Q&As, and the film is actually going to come out one day. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Well, congratulations all, and thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.